Doing a PhD is not just the first serious step into life in science. It can also be the start of an international career. Today we will talk to Luigi Piemontese, who moved from Italy to Sweden to do his PhD. How did he manage this transition, and what advice would he give to those considering doing a PhD abroad? So, Luigi, first of all, congratulations, you're done.
Thanks.
How does it feel?
Mixed feelings, actually. And it feels great to have my defense done and successfully, and it was exciting to discuss it with the committee members. But at the same time, I feel a bit sad that this journey is over. And, you know, like my whole life in the 4 years of my PhD was really focused on my PhD and the PhD group. So that's a bit of a sad note, but I guess it's life, and that's also part of the journey.
We're going to come back to your plans afterwards now and the road ahead. But let's talk a little bit about your research. Give us a summary. I mean, your thesis is called Sustainable Land and Water Management for a Greener Future. That's quite big, but your focus is slightly bit more on agroecological intensification.
Yeah.
Give us a nutshell of it.
And in few words, it's basically providing large-scale assessments of what could be the potential of agroecological practices and what are the barriers to achieve it from a national to the global scale, but grounding the assessment on local case studies, so providing really evidence-based assessment of how the sustainable agriculture could look like in the future based on how it works now in local cases. And I focus specifically on Africa and Uganda, where I conducted field work. And two of the 4 papers of my PhD thesis are about Uganda. But it's really like providing large-scale evidence from national to global scale, but grounded on local case studies.
So, all right, we want to talk to you today about, doing a PhD abroad primarily, and take us through the first period that when you decided to come to Sweden. You came here, new to the country and new to obviously to the Stockholm Resilience Center, etc. How was that, both practically and culturally and everything?
The very first impression was amazing. I ended up in such the vibrant environment as the Stockholm Resilience Center. And I remember I started late August, but I was new to the place, so I really didn't come to the office until maybe the day before Sturak also. And then from
which is like a staff retreat that we do every year on outside of Gotland.
Very tiny island, all for ourselves to enjoy. And I came to the office the day before, and the HR was kindly enough to include me in the trip. So basically, the first time I met my colleagues, it was in a very special occasion, and it was great. And I got to see that side of SRC that I think it's really impressive, and it's the artistic side of it, and people really engaged, not just scientifically, but also socially, personally, and in a very artistic way. And so that was my first impression. I was amazed. I was like, oh my God, this is incredible. And I had this impression of the research place also later on in my PhD. But then there were some other challenges related to living in Sweden as a foreigner, I think it was actually a bit of a hard time as well with the bureaucracy, getting the personal number. That was a bit tricky. But I still had the chance to come here in this place every day and meet people, meet other PhD students that became friends. So that was really what helped me in that transition phase.
But what about, you essentially start a new job in a new place, in a new country. So there are a lot of things that you have to take in. But you also start your work as a PhD, as a researcher. And there are lots of things to take into consideration, lots of things to learn, pretty much from day one. Now, how was that, in a combination of starting your PhD and doing so in a different country, in a new country?
I think starting a PhD is always a bit scary in a way, because you have this big project, quite vague at the beginning, that you can turn into different paths, but you have to do it yourself. You have the supervision of your supervisors, but it's really on you to decide what's the path you want to take. And that takes a lot of time and a lot of reading and thinking and discussing. So I kind of enjoyed that phase, but it was also quite stressful, because you, especially being in an international environment with people doing very exciting things in different topics, I felt like I wanted to do everything. You know, I was excited and interested about everything was going on here. But at the same time, I had a background, so I kind of had to build on what I knew. So it was, and it was great that my supervisors and everyone at the SRC really told me that I had to take my time to think of my project. So that helped me, because, as you said, in a parallel, I had to manage the everyday life in Sweden and all the stress related to getting started in the new tax system, the new phone numbers, the new places, and finding a place here in Stockholm is not easy as well. So there were many things, but I think I managed, because I had the freedom of taking a bit longer to think about what I wanted to do, and at the same time that gave me time and space to handle the other side of living in Sweden as well.
How important do you think it is, not just as a new student, PhD student, but even as someone coming from abroad, or indeed a completely different place, to be part of, to have a PhD network around you of PhD colleagues, if you want, when you try to settle in?
Yeah, that was my safety net. That was really what makes me feel, or it still makes me feel, I'm at home here. It's friends and PhD students here, or at least in my first couple of years of a PhD. We spent a lot of time together. We had an office for ourselves. We shared a lot. We had a very tight group, sharing our frustrations and celebrating every little success, and then we became great friends. And also because the PhD here really gives you the space to socialize with other PhD students. We have this great tradition of PhD retreats, where we go every semester somewhere in the countryside, spend a couple of days together talking about our challenges of being students, but also creating this connection that it's really great. I really relied a lot on that connection with my colleagues and friends.
Tell us a little bit, what kind of challenges did you have, or as a student here, what kind of challenges did you have?
The first challenge was to find my own way in my research, which was hard because there are so many different angles that you can approach some topic, and it's always interesting to explore different point of views, but at the same time you had to get things done, right? So navigating this excitement about researching more and from different angles, but still getting something concrete. That was my first challenge. Creating a routine outside the SRC, that was a bit challenging. And it forced me, though, to come up with new hobbies. coming from Italy, I used to spend a lot of time with friends outside work, and my social life was really important in my everyday life. Here it was a bit more quality time spent with friends, but most of the time you have to really rely on the social routine that it's different, right? So meeting friends occasionally, and that was challenging, but I also liked that because it gave me the chance to explore new hobbies. I started painting. It kind of brought out some creativity that I had sort of inside, because I've always been playing music and doing other stuff. But here I explored, for example, painting and wood carving. That's some hobbies that I will bring with me. So, and that it means that Sweden gave me a lot in this sense.
Did you ever feel lonely?
I did, especially at the beginning. Well, I mean, like as always, it was like at times I felt lonely, but I also appreciated the, kind of digging into myself and coming up with the, wood carving. I really value spending time in nature now, which I didn't do much before because that was not the environment that I grew up in. So now I'm so happy that I live in the forest and I can spend hours walking or carving in the forest and swimming in winter and all these other things that I think because I kind of like to see the positive side of things in life in general. So I felt lonely, but that pushed me to come up with something to cope with this loneliness. So I started, wood carving and going to the forest, enjoying nature. And then in the end, I sort of actually found a balance. So yeah.
And looking back then, what's the best thing about doing a PhD?
I always have a hard time of picking just one thing of anything. People ask me, what's your favorite song?
Yeah,
I don't have one. I have a list of amazing songs depending on the time, depending on the situation.
Best memories somewhat? Yeah,
best memories is really the time spent with my colleagues in our PhD retreats or after works or Frukstun, the fika time we used to have regularly before the pandemic. The social part of it, it's really what I enjoy the most.
What about the worst thing?
Worst thing? Worst thing is, I think, the challenge of having the responsibility to finish PhD work, which is something quite vague at the beginning. You have a topic, and you have to, in the end, you have to have 4 manuscript papers, and have a framework. It's so hard. Coming up with that book was still impossible a year ago to me. I couldn't see the end of it. I couldn't see the whole project put together nicely, and it's scary. It is scary, and you have to allow yourself to live in this uncertainty until the very end, because at the very end everyone pulls up a thesis and it's always great quality. So I kind of relied on that, but that was challenging. That was really bad. Sometimes you feel like, oh, I cannot do this,
And somewhat about trusting the process, it sounds like.
Yeah, having this also trusting yourself that you can make it. And I think that worst part really coupled well with the best part of it, because then how you overcome this fear is by talking to colleagues and having senior colleagues giving you advices or sharing frustration with peers that have the same difficulties.
How much what have you learned about yourself after doing fieldwork and obviously doing the whole PhD as well?
So much, because the PhD really put you in a situation of having to deal with something yourself. I mean, you have the support by someone else, but it's really you doing your work, and and you learn a lot from you and from your colleagues as well.
And then you have, obviously, as you mentioned, you have people around you. You have your supervisors, you have field assistants, etc. And specifically, your supervisors. How would you describe that relationship that you had with yours?
It was. I remember when I came here for the interview the first time, and I met Fernando, my main supervisor. It was really surprising to me to see how friendly he was and how it was really honest with me, and that was one of the reasons that made me choose this place to do my PhD, and I loved it. I loved the relationship we have, and it was a journey that as well, and we shared a lot of moments outside of work together that kind of helped building this relationship. And he really treated me as a friend since the beginning, and this is something I really appreciated. And also gave me the freedom to choose my own direction in the PhD, but also supporting me a lot during the way. So it did just great. I think it was a very good work relationship, but also outside work relationship.
We've spoken to Fernando and asked him a few of these same questions, and let's see what he said. Hi Fernando, great to see you, and thanks for taking the time off to talk to us today about Luigi's defense and his PhD and his road to becoming a doctor.
Thanks to you, Sole.
And indeed, Luigi just graduated a few days ago. How did the defense go, you think?
Well, yeah, it went very well. We're very happy. His defense was last Friday. It started at 1 p.m. and he did a great presentation. Yeah, he had really practiced, so everything went really smoothly. He also had a very good opponent and very well-known committee members in the field. So it was really a very interesting feedback. And the deliberation, yeah, it went around. It was almost 4 hours of science, nonstop, asking questions, critical comments, also nice comments about what the committee members and the opponent thought about his work. But everything went well. Thank you. And finally, he passed. So great.
Great indeed, yeah. Now, Luigi is highly appreciated at the SRC, both obviously as a researcher, but even as a person. How would you describe Luigi as a person?
Okay, yeah, Luigi, I would say Luigi is not only a researcher, he's a little bit like a researcher and an artist at the same time. So he has the brain is completely developed equally in 50% sides left and right. So he has put a lot of that into his research, and also you can see that also from the number of friends that he has and how people appreciate him, and also from the relationship that we've developed, because I really consider him as a friend, and so I think he's a person that gets in other people, that gets appreciated very easily, and yeah.
So I mean, and how would you say then that he has? I mean, you touched upon things like everything from the artistic dimension to systems thinking. How would you say then that fits into SRC's wider research?
Okay, well, yes, I would say that it fits there, first of all, because it's out of the ordinary way of thinking. So he has approached a complicated research question, which is how can agriculture be sustainable in the end and help livelihoods and help the environment and etc. And how can it help to achieve the SDGs and reduce the food gap? So he has actually tried to use a different approach, which is actually taking into perspective the barriers, or try to understand why is it that sustainable agriculture is not as popular as it should be. So yeah, so he builds from below, trying to see what are the barriers that hinder sustainable agriculture. the social barriers? Is it poverty? Is it like lack of leadership, lack of community feeling? Is it gender that is also an issue? So he tries to build on that and try to explain how can sustainable agriculture be improved and expanded.
Fernando, I want to talk to you as well about the relationship between you as a supervisor and the PhD student. Now, you mentioned already that you and Luigi become good friends and you have a good relationship, presumably both professionally and socially. But how would you describe that relationship?
Yeah, well, it basically the relationship, the product of the relationship is basically because, well, obviously it's Luigi's, I would say, like first attempt to really go into academia. And so it's my first PhD student. So, and he started the PhD position right after I got my PhD 1 year afterwards. So I was very new to this supervision, and so it's been quite a story, quite a path for both of us. So I think at the same time, both of us were going through different paths where we needed like to develop, right?
And okay, but now that you can look back and the experiences that you have accumulated as well as a supervisor, what would you say you've learned?
Yeah, I've learned that you have to give freedom to the students, that you cannot just impose what you want to be done. Of course, you can guide the students in the way that you want to develop your research, but in reality, it's a personal path that the PhD student needs to take. So, and the path will be much better if it's really what this PhD student wants to do.
So Luigi is now graduated. He's a doctor. And exciting days are ahead of him. What advice would you give to Luigi and indeed to others who are about to embark on their new career as doctors?
I would really recommend him not to just like be happy with a postdoc, but rather to keep, for instance, take advantage of all these opportunities that students have in Sweden to develop their own research. So to Formas, apply to VR, to all these openings that are still in Sweden, because they're really good opportunities so that you develop your own path and get like a permanent position. So I encourage you to not lose track of that and be aware that he has opportunities.
Okay, so Luigi, Fernando says you have opportunities. How is anything you want to say to Fernando's reflections?
No, I'm really grateful to what he said, and he really believed in me as a researcher since the beginning. And I didn't really follow his suggestion at first. Like he recommended to not rush into something else now. So I'm gonna do a postdoc. I actually started already with this postdoc in Florence, University of Florence, and I will be working with a colleague of mine that became a good friend of mine in the last couple of years.
Final question, Luigi. What advice would you give to someone considering doing a PhD and considering moving abroad?
If you're determined to do a PhD, I would really recommend to be sure that your supervisor is the kind of supervisor that you want and that you need for your work, because the relationship with the supervisor is a very important aspect of the PhD. And the main struggle of some colleagues of mine, people I know in their PhD, really it's related to the relationship with their supervisor. It's not that they're bad or good supervisor, it's just a relationship has to be fit for the type of person you are and the type of researcher you are. So that's really important, point one. Point two, this was actually a question I got in my interview for the PhD position. Like, how would you, if you have a bad time in your research, how do you handle this? And my question back then as now is rely on your colleagues and your friends and people you know, and you'll find a way to overcome the problems.
And I guess that's especially important if you do indeed come from, you move to a new country, a new place.
Yeah, you don't have the same social network as a person that is doing a PhD in their country, right? So it's particularly important, yes, definitely.
Well, Luigi, there are so many people who will miss you now that you are heading back to Florence, to Italy. We really hope to see you again, but above all, we wish you the best of luck, and yes,
Thanks,
take care.
Ruben.
So, adapting to a life in science abroad may come with some additional practical, professional and cultural challenges. But as Luigi could testify, there are so many exciting benefits to it as well. Immerse yourself in your new environment, and in the end, you might actually find it a bit too difficult to leave behind.